Step out now. A black woman driving a car. This expensive. Something's not right here. Officer James Anderson gripped his weapon as the luxury car door opened. He had called backup, convinced he had caught a drug dealer. What business did someone like her have driving a $75,000 luxury car? This arrest would make his career. Cedar Ridge, the wealthiest neighborhood in the city, had been Anderson's hunting ground all morning. He had spotted the black luxury car 6 blocks back. Tinted windows, expensive rims, driving through streets where she clearly did not belong. Everything about this screamed wrong. 3 backup units were already in position. The driver stepped out with military precision. Anderson expected attitude resistance. Instead, she stood perfectly straight, shoulders back. Anderson's smirk froze full military dress. Uniform ribbons covering her chest, silver eagles on shoulders, a colonel. Backup sirens wailed like a funeral march for his career officer. "You just made an assumption that will cost you everything," she said with deadly calm. Anderson's hand trembled. He had not pulled over a criminal. He just destroyed someone with the power to end his career forever. 2 hours earlier, James Anderson started his shift like any other day, coffee in hand, scrolling through the arrest photos from last week. Mostly black faces stared back at him from the screen. "Anderson, we need those numbers up," Sergeant Miller called out during morning briefing. "New proactive policing initiative in the Cedar Ridge district. Keep your eyes open for anything suspicious." Anderson nodded with satisfaction. Cedar Ridge meant expensive houses, luxury cars, and easy targets who did not belong. His kind of hunting ground. "Roger that, Sarge. I will keep the peace." Meanwhile, across town, Colonel Catherine Morgan finished her morning physical training at exactly 06:05 hours. 25 years of military discipline did not allow for lazy mornings. She checked her encrypted emails, another Pentagon meeting about the $55 million civilian military police cooperation budget. Her luxury car sat in the driveway, gleaming in the morning sun. A gift from her late husband, a veteran who had saved every deployment bonus to buy it for her promotion to colonel. The car represented sacrifice, honor, and dreams finally achieved. Morgan slipped into her civilian clothes, but kept her dress uniform hanging in the back seat. Base inspection at 14. 15 hours required full military dress. And she never took chances with regulations. She pulled out of her driveway completely unaware that her success would soon become someone's target. Anderson patrolled Cedar Ridge district with predatory focus. 3 traffic stops already. All clean, all disappointing. Then he spotted it, a luxury car with tinted windows, expensive rims driving the speed limit. "Through the nicest part of town. Dispatch, this is Unit 251. I have eyes on a suspicious vehicle. Black luxury car, tinted windows, does not fit the neighborhood profile." Anderson's pulse quickened. This felt different. This felt like the big score he had been waiting for. He followed 3 blocks behind, building his case in his mind. Expensive car, wrong driver, definitely stolen or drug money. Backup requested to Cedar Ridge in Maine. Possible stolen vehicle, suspected drug activity. Morgan checked her mirrors professionally. The patrol car had been following for 6 blocks, now maintaining distance, but clearly tracking her years of convoy security in the Middle East, kicked in automatically. Hands visible on wheel speed, exactly at limit signals for every turn. She had no idea the officer behind her had already decided she was guilty. Anderson smiled as more units responded to his call. This was about to become the arrest of his career. He hit his emergency lights with pure satisfaction, but what Anderson did not know was that he just targeted the one person who could destroy his entire department. Anderson stepped out of his patrol car with the swagger of a hunter who had cornered his prey. 3 backup units positioned themselves strategically around the luxury car. Lights flashing like a Hollywood movie set. Morgan pulled over smoothly, engine off, hands clearly visible on the steering wheel. Every movement precise, professional, exactly how she trained thousands of soldiers to behave during vehicle checkpoints in combat zones. Anderson approached the driver's side, hand resting on his weapon. His body language screamed authority and barely contained aggression. "Do you know why I stopped you?" "No, sir. Please inform me," Morgan replied with military precision, her voice calm and respectful. Anderson's jaw tightened. He had expected attitude and argument, something to justify the escalation. He had planned. Her compliance was almost insulting. "Step out of the vehicle now." Morgan complied smoothly, keeping her hands visible. She moved with unmistakable military bearing, straight posture, controlled movements, eyes alert but non-threatening. Anderson noticed something different about her but could not quite place it. "Whose car is this?" Anderson's tone implied theft before she even answered mine. "Sir, registration and insurance are in the glove compartment along with my identification." Morgan handed over her documents, including her military ID. Anderson barely glanced at the military identification, his attention laser-focused on the expensive vehicle registration. "How do you afford a car like this?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Morgan understood exactly what he was really asking. "I am a military officer, sir. This vehicle was purchased with legitimate military pay and deployment bonuses." By now, 3 more officers had arrived. Anderson felt invincible with backup, his confidence growing with each additional uniform. Morgan remained perfectly calm, mentally. Cataloguing badge numbers, patrol car numbers, and timestamps, her strategic mind was already working. "I am going to search this vehicle," Anderson announced. "Sir, do you have a warrant or probable cause for the search?" Anderson's face flushed red. "Suspicious behavior and ongoing drug investigation. That is all the probable cause I need." Morgan knew her constitutional rights, but she also calculated the situation tactically. "Resist now and face certain violence or document everything for systematic justice. Later I will comply under protest. Officer James Anderson." Anderson heard only defiance in her measured words. "Smart choice," he smirked, moving toward her trunk. But when Anderson popped that trunk open, everything was about to change forever. Anderson popped the trunk with the confidence of a man who knew he was about to find drugs, weapons, or stolen goods. Instead, he found something that should have stopped him. Cold, a military deployment bag sat neatly in the corner, with a perfectly pressed dress uniform visible through the clear garment bag. Military ribbons, commendations, and medals were carefully organized in a presentation case. Any reasonable officer would have recognized the significance immediately. Anderson was not reasonable playing dress-up now. Anderson pulled out the uniform, handling it roughly like a costume. "Where did you steal this from, a pawn shop?" Morgan's jaw clenched as she watched him disrespect the uniform that represented her life's service, her sacrifice, her honor. Anderson opened the metal case, pulling out her bronze star. "These fake too. You people really go all out with the props." He dropped the bronze star carelessly. It hit the pavement with a metallic clink that echoed like a gunshot in Morgan's ears. "Sir, those are legitimate military commendations earned through 25 years of active service." "Sure they are, sweetheart." Anderson kicked at the fallen metal. "What's next? You going to tell me?" "You are a general. The body cameras were recording everything." Morgan knew that Anderson's backup knew that, but Anderson was too intoxicated by his own power to care. "Turn around, hands on the vehicle, sir." "If you are conducting a search department, policy requires a female officer." "I will decide what policy requires." Anderson's voice cracked like a whip. Morgan complied, knowing the cameras captured every violation of procedure, every breach of her rights, every moment of this humiliation. Anderson dumped her purse contents onto the ground. Military challenge coins scattered across the asphalt, gifts from grateful soldiers whose lives she had saved. Each coin represented a mission accomplished, a life preserved, an oath fulfilled. Anderson stepped on them like they were worthless trinkets. Drug money. Anderson waved her cash per diem from last week's Pentagon meetings. How much you carrying here, sweetheart, sir? That money is legitimate per diem from official government travel. Anderson's backup officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Something felt wrong about this stop, but nobody wanted to challenge Anderson's authority. The blue wall of silence held firm. We are going to need the drug dog, Anderson announced deliberately, extending the detention beyond legal limits. That's when Sergeant Parker arrived. Parker was a 20-year veteran who had seen enough real criminals to recognize when something did not add up. He watched Morgan's composed responses, her military bearing, her professional compliance under extreme pressure. Anderson, what have we got here? Suspected drug dealer Sarge. Expensive car acting, suspicious, probably stolen military gear. Parker studied Morgan more carefully. Something about her posture, her discipline, her way of standing at attention. Even while being humiliated, ma'am, can I see that? Military ID again? Morgan handed over her identification. This time, someone actually read it. Colonel Catherine. Morgan, 25 years active duty. Current assignment. Pentagon. Parker's face went pale, but Morgan had already made a decision that would end more than just Anderson's career. Morgan looked into Parker's confused eyes and realized the truth. There would be no peaceful resolution here. Anderson's pride had painted him into a corner, and he would rather destroy her than admit his catastrophic mistake. That's when Colonel Catherine Morgan made a decision that would reshape American law enforcement forever. She shifted from defensive victim to strategic predator in the span of a heartbeat. Her military mind began cataloging every violation, every witness, every piece of evidence she would need to systematically destroy everyone who had participated in this humiliation. Officers, I need to contact my attorney. That is my constitutional right. Anderson could not deny the request without adding another obvious violation to his growing list of career-ending mistakes. Morgan pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Anderson assumed she was calling some public defender. He had no idea she was about to trigger a Pentagon-level response. This is Wolverine 6, Morgan said calmly into the phone, requesting immediate command notification. I am currently detained by civilian law enforcement, legal authority. Questionable time is 1300 Road, location intersection of Cedar and Oak Street. Badge numbers 243, 351, 448. Detention without probable cause, search without warrant. Military uniform. Desecrated federal officer interference. Parker caught the precision of her language, the military time format, the professional terminology. This was not how drug dealers talk to their lawyers within minutes. Morgan's phone buzzed with encrypted responses. Base commander alerted Pentagon. Liaison contacted military legal en route. Congressional notification authorized, time's up. Anderson snatched the phone from her hands. Federal crime interfering with a military officer's official communications. But Anderson had no idea what he had just done. Morgan looked directly into Anderson's eyes. With the calm of someone who had faced enemy fire and lived. Officer Anderson, you have just committed your final mistake in law enforcement. The consequences will be beyond anything you can imagine. Is that a threat? It is a mathematical certainty. Parker felt ice run down his spine. There was something in her voice, something in her absolute confidence that made him believe every word Morgan was placed in handcuffs. But she used the walk to the patrol car to send one final text to her Pentagon. Contact full military response authorized congressional notification level as Anderson drove. Toward the station, he was practically glowing with satisfaction. Another criminal off the streets, another successful arrest to pad his statistics. He had no idea that at that exact moment, 3 Pentagon generals were already reviewing the body camera footage that had been automatically uploaded to federal databases. He had no idea that Morgan's lawyer was actually a Joint Chiefs of Staff communications officer. He had no idea that the woman in his back seat controlled $55 million in federal police funding. Most importantly, Anderson had no idea that his department was about to become a case study in what happens when local law enforcement attacks the wrong federal officer. The reckoning was already beginning, and Anderson was still smiling at the police station. Anderson paraded Morgan through the booking area like a prize trophy. Every officer in the building watched as he brought in his big catch, the suspicious black woman with the expensive car. "What have we got?" Anderson asked Desk Sergeant Reynolds, eyeing Morgan's military-bearing drug dealer with fake military gear. "Stolen car investigation," Anderson announced proudly. Ignoring the obvious contradictions in Morgan's composed demeanor, Morgan endured the fingerprinting and mugshots with military discipline. Each flash of the camera, each humiliating procedure only strengthened her resolve. The booking officers could not help but notice something different about her, the way she stood at attention, her direct eye contact, her calm under extreme pressure. This was not how criminals usually acted. Anderson embellished his incident report with creative fiction: erratic driving, attempted flight, resistance to arrest. His backup officers stayed silent, complicit in the lies their body cameras told a completely different story. But they trusted Anderson to handle any awkward questions. "Later, I need my phone call," Morgan said simply. Anderson delayed the process, hoping to extend her humiliation as long as possible when he finally allowed the call. Morgan contacted military legal services directly. Within 30 minutes, the base commander had been briefed on the entire situation. Military protocols kicked in automatically. Any detention of a federal officer by civilian authorities triggered immediate investigation procedures. Anderson made his fatal mistake when he decided to place Morgan in the general holding cell with actual criminals. It was a dangerous power play, putting a military officer among violent offenders just to prove his dominance. The other inmates recognized Morgan's bearing immediately. 2 former soldiers among them offered protection. Instinctively, one whispered that he had served, and something about her rank insignia looked familiar. Words spread through the cell. This woman was the real deal. Meanwhile, 3 expensive cars pulled into the station parking lot. Military legal officers and civilian attorney stepped out, their presence causing immediate anxiety among the desk staff. Why would a drug dealer need this kind of legal firepower? Reynolds muttered. That's when the front desk phone rang. Pentagon direct line. Captain Thompson took the call personally. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and absolutely terrifying. "This is Colonel Harrison, Base Commander. We need immediate confirmation of Colonel Morgan's welfare and current detention status." Thompson's face went white as paper. "Real Colonel, real Pentagon, real career, ending crisis." Thompson slammed down the phone and sprinted toward the holding cells, but it was already too late to stop what Anderson had set in motion. Thompson burst through the station doors like a man whose house was on fire. He cornered Anderson in the hallway, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. "Anderson, please tell me you did not actually arrest a real military colonel." Anderson's swagger evaporated instantly. The Pentagon did not make courtesy calls about fake IDs and stolen cars. "Sir, she had expensive stuff. Did not fit the profile I thought you thought." Thompson's voice cracked. The Pentagon does not think Anderson. They know body camera footage was already being reviewed in real time. Morgan's professional behavior throughout the entire arrest was undeniable. Every protocol Anderson violated, every constitutional right. He trampled every lie he told, all captured in high definition. 3 military vehicles with government plates had arrived in the station parking lot. Base commanders, military police, and JAG officers marched through the front doors like they owned the place. The entire station erupted in nervous energy. Officers whispered in corners. Desk staff made urgent phone calls, and everyone suddenly found reasons to be anywhere except near Anderson. Thompson ordered Morgan's immediate release, but the damage was catastrophic. The military delegation demanded complete briefings, all video evidence, and every document related to the arrest. This was not going away with apologies and paperwork. Anderson attempted desperate damage control, claiming the traffic stop was legitimate and everything just got misunderstood, but military officers reviewed footage with surgical precision. They saw an experienced colonel under fire, handling the situation with more professionalism than many police officers could manage. Base Commander Colonel Harrison interviewed Morgan privately in Thompson's office. Her account matched the video evidence perfectly, down to exact quotes from Anderson's verbal attacks. Harrison recognized quality leadership under pressure. Morgan's composure had actually prevented the situation from escalating to violence, protecting everyone involved, including Anderson's career, though he destroyed that himself. Military legal briefed civilian authorities on the federal implications: interference with military duties, civil rights violations, false arrest of a federal officer. The charges were multiplying exponentially. Anderson's backup partners started distancing themselves faster than rats abandoning a sinking ship. Union representatives arrived, but found precious little to defend when faced with clear video evidence and Pentagon involvement. Local media caught wind of the story. Military vehicles at a police station was unusual enough to attract attention. Radio scanners had picked up Anderson's original backup calls about a suspicious black female. Social media began lighting up with leaked footage, professional military officer. Enduring harassment while maintaining perfect discipline, the optics were absolutely devastating. Anderson's world was crumbling in real time, and he still had no idea how powerful Morgan really was. News vans began arriving within hours, military colonel arrested by police. This was the kind of story that spread like wildfire across local media, then quickly jumped to national coverage. Anderson's attempts at damage control backfired spectacularly. Every interview request, every statement to supervisors only highlighted the obvious contradictions between his written report and the crystal-clear video evidence. Morgan refused to leave the station quietly. She demanded immediate meetings with the mayor, police chief, and district attorney. Her military brass backed every demand with the full weight of federal authority. City officials scrambled for crisis management mode. This was not routine. Police misconduct. Military involvement meant federal oversight, congressional attention, and national media scrutiny. Investigators began digging into Anderson's history, and what they found was devastating. A clear pattern emerged: multiple incidents of racial profiling, excessive force complaints, and citizen grievances. The department had protected him through union agreements and internal reviews for years while civilian authorities panicked. The military investigation proceeded with clockwork efficiency. Base Commander Harrison authorized full cooperation with media, civilian authorities, and oversight agencies. Military transparency stood in stark contrast to police department secrecy. Morgan scheduled a press conference for the next morning. Military legal cleared her statements, and her service record went public. Bronze Star recipient, Combat Action Badge. Multiple deployments. 25 years of exemplary reviews. Social media pressure exploded overnight. #JusticeForColonel began trending nationally. Veterans organizations expressed outrage at the desecration of military uniforms and medals. Civil rights groups demanded immediate federal investigation. Anderson's personal life imploded as quickly as his professional one. His family received threatening phone calls, his children faced harassment at school, his wife seriously considered separation. Career destruction was spreading into complete personal devastation. The police union attempted damage control, but found themselves defending the indefensible. Clear video evidence, Pentagon involvement, and national media attention made this a political nightmare. District Attorney's Office began reviewing potential criminal charges: false arrest, civil rights violations, abuse of authority under color of law. Federal prosecutors examined the federal crime components by midnight. The mayor was calling emergency meetings with the police chief, demanding a comprehensive accountability plan before federal intervention became inevitable. Anderson sat in his empty house, scrolling through social media posts calling him every name imaginable. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the dawning realization that he destroyed everything. But tomorrow's press conference would reveal Morgan's true power and the $55 million bomb show that would reshape law enforcement forever. The press conference convened at Cedar Ridge City Hall. Morgan appeared in full dress uniform, every ribbon and medal. Precisely positioned, the assembled media immediately recognized this was not just another police misconduct victim. This was someone important. Military Public Affairs Officer. Captain Carter approached the podium first. "Ladies and gentlemen." Present Colonel Catherine Morgan, United States Army, 25 years active service. Bronze Star recipient and current Pentagon liaison for civilian-military law enforcement cooperation programs. The room stirred with interest, but the real bombshell was still coming. Morgan stepped to the microphone with the bearing of someone accustomed to briefing generals and congressmen. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Yesterday's incident represents a fundamental failure of training judgment and character that calls into question this department's fitness for continued federal partnership. Reporters leaned forward, sensing something bigger than a simple traffic stop story. Morgan continued with military precision. "I currently oversee $55 million in annual federal funding for military-civilian police training programs. Nationwide, this specific department receives $2.5 million annually, $5 million annually from programs under my direct administration." The room exploded. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and city officials watching on live television felt their stomachs drop. Military funding. Withdrawal would devastate the department budget force, massive layoffs, eliminate specialized units, and cancel equipment purchases planned for the next 3 years. My role at the Pentagon includes oversight of national police reform initiatives. My recommendations carry direct weight with congressional defense committees, federal funding allocations, and military contractor selections nationwide. Anderson, watching from the department break room, finally understood the scope of his catastrophic mistake. He had not just attacked some random military officer, he had humiliated the person who controlled his department's funding, future, and federal relationships. Morgan's calm voice delivered the third devastating revelation. Based on yesterday's experience, military investigation has expanded to review all departments receiving federal law enforcement cooperation funding. My treatment will serve as a test case for continued military-civilian partnerships. Nationwide, Captain Thompson's face appeared on camera. Behind the podium, his expression pure horror as the implications sank in. Federal audit funding withdrawal, public oversight, media scrutiny, congressional investigation, legal liability. Everything hitting simultaneously. The fourth revelation hit like a nuclear bomb. My Pentagon network includes Joint Chiefs of Staff, Liaison, Congressional Defense Committee. Members, Federal Law Enforcement Oversight, Directors, Academic Research Institutions, and International Policing, Cooperation Programs. Yesterday's phone call triggered responses throughout the entire military-civilian law enforcement community. Questions from reporters revealed additional devastating context. Morgan had personally designed many of the training protocols Anderson's department claimed to follow his. Violations demonstrated complete failure of systems she had developed and implemented. Anderson's history of complaints was examined under this new light. The pattern of behavior contradicted department claims. Of isolated incident, Morgan's professional analysis identified systematic failure to implement federal training requirements that her department certified compliance with. Annually, union lawyers frantically approached Morgan's legal team, seeking private settlement discussions. She refused absolutely. This required public accountability, systematic reform, and transparent oversight. The final revelation destroyed any hope of quiet resolution. My next assignment after completing this Pentagon tour is command of the Military Police Training Academy. My experience here will directly influence how military police interact with civilian law enforcement for decades to come. Her closing statement carried the precision of a military briefing. This incident transcends personal grievance, represents a critical test of whether civilian law enforcement can maintain federal partnership privileges through demonstrated commitment to constitutional policing and professional accountability. The translation was crystal clear to everyone watching. Fix this systematically and permanently, or lose federal support forever. Anderson's career officially ended in that moment. The union could not defend violations against a federal partner. The department could not support such massive liability risk. The city could not afford federal investigation and funding loss. Morgan concluded with measured precision. I will personally ensure this incident catalyzes meaningful reform, benefiting all citizens and law enforcement professionals committed to constitutional service. Her words carried the weight of Pentagon authority, federal funding power, congressional influence, and military justice tradition. The local police department faced an ultimatum: embrace comprehensive reform under Morgan's direct oversight or face federal intervention, complete funding loss, and possible federal takeover of operations. Anderson drove home to an empty house. His wife had left that morning. His children were staying with relatives. Neighbors avoided eye contact. The full scope of consequences was finally crystallizing. Morgan returned to base and received congratulations from commanding officers. Her professional handling had elevated military reputation while exposing civilian law enforcement failures on a national stage. The real consequences were just beginning, and they would reshape law enforcement across the entire state within 48 hours of Morgan's press conference. The federal machine activated with devastating efficiency that would reshape American law enforcement forever. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation with unprecedented scope. FBI agents descended on the police station with moving trucks, computer forensics teams, and federal warrants covering every aspect of department operations. They began comprehensive audits of department practices, training records, complaint histories, and financial management of federal grants dating back 7 years. Morgan's Pentagon superiors authorized complete military cooperation. With civilian investigators, they provided comprehensive documentation of training contracts, funding requirements, compliance standards, and evaluation metrics that painted a damning picture. The department's repeated violations of federal training protocols became evidence in what was rapidly becoming the largest civil rights case in the state's history. City legal teams scrambled desperately for damage control, but insurance companies were already reviewing liability coverage for civil rights violations. Municipal bond ratings faced immediate downgrade reviews. Federal investigations triggered automatic financial oversight provisions that could affect the city's borrowing capacity. For decades, credit agencies placed the city on negative watch list. Anderson faced coordinated legal attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. Federal civil rights charges, state criminal prosecution, civil liability lawsuits, and police misconduct investigations all proceeded on parallel tracks. His pension was under review for complete forfeiture. Due to felony convictions, his union representation was quietly withdrawn. After lawyers determined the case was completely unwinnable, the department's union officially distanced itself while quietly encouraging members to cooperate fully with federal investigators. Body camera footage protected officers who remained professional throughout the incident, while completely condemning Anderson's obvious violations of basic constitutional rights. Morgan's military legal team filed a federal lawsuit seeking declaratory judgment about police departments' fitness for continued federal funding. The president could affect similar departments in all 50 states and reshape the entire landscape of federal-local law enforcement cooperation. The first corporate consequence hit with immediate, devastating impact. Police equipment suppliers began reviewing contracts en masse across multiple states. Military-grade equipment required federal approval departments under civil rights investigation automatically lost advance purchases. Millions in pending orders were cancelled overnight, affecting manufacturers nationwide. The second wave followed within days like a financial tsunami. Training contractors cancelled programs across the board, avoiding any association with departments. Facing federal oversight, private companies could not afford reputational damage from controversial partnerships. Revenue streams that departments had relied on for years vanished immediately, forcing budget emergencies. Insurance premiums skyrocketed as civil rights violations triggered comprehensive liability coverage. Reviews: the department faced an immediate budget crisis from increased coverage costs that exceeded their annual equipment budget by 300%. State legislature called emergency hearings on police accountability statewide. Morgan was invited to testify about military-civilian law enforcement partnerships, federal funding, oversight, and reform requirements. Her appearance was scheduled for prime-time television, guaranteeing maximum media coverage and political impact. Her testimony systematically destroyed the state law enforcement lobby. With clinical precision, current oversight systems failed, catastrophically. Federal investment requires genuine accountability measures, not cosmetic reforms designed to protect misconduct. While maintaining funding streams, academic partnerships collapsed. Next, in a domino effect, universities receiving federal grants for police research could not maintain relationships with departments under active civil rights investigation. Research programs worth millions in federal funding were suspended indefinitely, affecting criminal justice programs nationwide. Anderson's criminal defense attorney attempted to negotiate a plea agreement, but federal prosecutors smelled blood in the water. They offered reduced charges only in exchange for complete cooperation in a broader investigation that was expanding. To examine systematic patterns across multiple departments statewide, Anderson's detailed testimony revealed department culture that actively tolerated racial profiling, excessive force and constitutional violations through informal protection systems. His cooperation opened floodgates to federal examination of practices the department had successfully hidden for decades. City financial analysis painted an absolutely devastating picture. Federal funding lost $2.4 million annually with no replacement sources. Legal defense costs $525,000 estimated minimum, potentially reaching millions. Settlement liability $2.6 million estimated, based on similar federal cases. Insurance premium increases $310,000 annually for basic coverage. Reform implementation costs $1.25 million upfront investment required. The total exceeded the police department's budget increases for the next 5 years combined. The alternative was federal takeover of department operations under direct Justice Department supervision. Political fallout spread like wildfire through local government. The mayor faced recall petitions, with thousands of signatures collected in record time. The police chief announced early retirement, effective immediately to avoid termination. City council members rushed to distance themselves from law enforcement policies they had unanimously supported just weeks earlier. Morgan's influence extended far beyond local impact into national policy development. Pentagon briefings included her recommendations for comprehensive policy changes in military-civilian law enforcement cooperation. Her incident became the primary catalyst for federal policy, affecting thousands of departments nationwide. Congressional defense committees scheduled extensive hearings to review all police training. Funding nationwide, Morgan's case became the definitive example for enhanced oversight requirements, accountability measures, and funding conditions that would fundamentally reshape American policing practices. Media investigations expanded exponentially. Across multiple states, national outlets began examining similar incidents in other departments receiving federal training funds. Patterns emerged of inadequate oversight, ineffective training, and systematic accountability failures, spanning dozens of states and hundreds of departments. Anderson's family faced complete social ostracism that destroyed their entire support network. His children transferred schools twice to escape relentless harassment from classmates and teachers. His wife filed divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences and unbearable public humiliation. Extended family members publicly expressed shame and completely distanced themselves from his actions. Economic impact spread throughout the city, like a cancer federal investigation. Delayed economic development projects, requiring federal approval or funding. Business relocations were reconsidered due to law enforcement reputation damage. Tourism declined as negative publicity spread nationally through social media. Morgan briefed Pentagon leadership on systematic reform requirements derived directly from her experience. Her recommendations became immediate federal policy. Enhanced background checks for departments receiving military cooperation. Mandatory bias training with federal oversight, automatic funding suspension for civil rights violations, and comprehensive annual compliance audits. External legal counsel recommended comprehensive settlement, including public apology policy reforms, federal oversight, acceptance, financial compensation, personnel changes, and training modifications. The total price tag approached 8 figures when including long-term compliance costs. Morgan's response through her legal team was absolutely uncompromising. Settlement must include structural changes preventing future incidents. Not just financial compensation, accountability must be systematic, permanent and federally monitored with measurable outcomes. State-level policy changes accelerated rapidly under federal pressure. The governor announced a comprehensive police reform initiative based entirely on Morgan's recommendations. Federal funding for all state law enforcement would require enhanced accountability measures that departments across the state scrambled desperately to implement. The department faced an existential choice: accept federal oversight with comprehensive reform requirements, or reject federal funding and operate with dramatically reduced budget, limited equipment, and constrained operations that would effectively end modern policing capabilities. Anderson's final attempt at legal defense collapsed when investigators uncovered additional body camera footage from previous incidents. The evidence showed clear patterns of racial profiling, constitutional violations, and aggressive behavior toward minority citizens spanning his entire career. The department had systematically protected him through union agreements, despite overwhelming evidence of continuous misconduct. Morgan's professional reputation was enhanced nationally by her exemplary incident handling. Pentagon leadership considered early promotion, expanded authority over civilian military law enforcement programs, and increased responsibility for national policy development, affecting federal-local law enforcement cooperation. Nationwide, corporate America began taking serious notice. Defense contractors questioned whether to maintain relationships with police departments facing federal oversight. Technology companies providing surveillance equipment reconsidered contracts with agencies under civil rights investigation. The ripple effects were fundamentally transforming American law enforcement. At the federal level, and Anderson's single traffic stop had triggered the largest systematic reform in modern policing history. Anderson's termination hearing convened 3 weeks later with national media attention that transformed the small hearing room into a circus department. Officials attempted to portray the incident as isolated misconduct by a single rogue officer, but their strategy crumbled before federal investigators even presented evidence. Morgan testified via secure video conference directly from the Pentagon, her full dress uniform and military bearing, creating a stark contrast to Anderson's wrinkled civilian clothes and obvious desperation. The visual alone told the entire story. Federal investigators presented their first piece of evidence. Anderson's training records revealed multiple failures to complete required bias training, de-escalation courses, and constitutional law updates over a 3-year period. The department had signed federal compliance certifications while knowingly allowing Anderson to operate without current training. This represents systematic deception of federal oversight, the lead investigator stated flatly. Not individual failure, but institutional fraud. Anderson's training supervisor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As the evidence mounted, the second revelation was even more damaging. Complaint history revealed a deliberate pattern of citizen grievances systematically dismissed through internal review process designed to protect officers rather than serve justice. Federal investigation found documented evidence of protecting officers like Anderson through institutional bias spanning multiple years. Morgan's testimony was devastating. In its professional precision, Officer Anderson's actions demonstrate complete failure of training systems, supervisory oversight, and accountability measures that federal funding specifically requires. This was not an accident. This was predictable. Anderson's defense attorney attempted to shift blame to department leadership, claiming inadequate training and cultural pressures beyond Anderson's control. The strategy backfired spectacularly when federal prosecutors used his testimony to expand investigation beyond individual misconduct into systematic department failures. The third piece of evidence destroyed any remaining sympathy. Body camera footage from Anderson's previous incidents showed clear patterns of racial profiling, constitutional violations, and aggressive behavior toward minority citizens. Over 18 months, the department had protected him through union agreements, despite overwhelming evidence of continuous problems. Department union representatives realized defending Anderson threatened their entire membership. They announced the union would not appeal termination decisions if federal investigation limited scope to Anderson's individual actions rather than expanding to examine union protection practices. Federal prosecutors rejected the bargain. Immediately, investigation continues regardless of individual termination. Systematic problems require systematic solutions beyond individual accountability. Anderson's personal testimony revealed the full depth of his bias entitlement and assumption of protection through police culture. His own words condemned him completely, showing no genuine regret for actions, only consequences. I was doing my job the way I was taught. Anderson insisted, "Nobody ever told me this was wrong." The hearing officer reviewed federal requirements for police departments receiving military cooperation. Funding. Anderson's violations breached multiple federal mandates. The department had certified compliance with annually for 5 years. Morgan's cross-examination by Anderson's attorney backfired spectacularly. Her military precision, factual responses, and professional demeanor highlighted Anderson's complete incompetence and unprofessionalism in devastating detail. Anderson made his final mistake when he attempted to question Morgan's credibility directly. "She is playing the race card for personal advantage. This whole thing is blown out of proportion." The comment demonstrated continued bias, complete lack of understanding, and absolute absence of professional growth or remorse. Federal investigators presented financial evidence showing the department had systematically used federal training funds for equipment purchases while deliberately skipping mandatory bias training, de-escalation programs, and constitutional law courses for 3 consecutive years. Anderson's former supervisor provided the final testimony, revealing systematic pressure to protect officers regardless of misconduct. The culture of impunity had enabled Anderson's behavior through years of protected violations. While federal funding continued flowing, the hearing officer determined termination was completely justified, but noted individual accountability was insufficient for systematic problems requiring federal oversight and comprehensive reform. Anderson's final statement revealed no genuine remorse whatsoever. He continued blaming Morgan for overreacting, the department for abandoning a loyal officer, and the federal government for political persecution designed to destroy good cops. The decision was announced immediately. Termination upheld pension completely forfeited. Criminal prosecution supported civil liability. Confirmed. Anderson was officially stripped of police authority law enforcement certification, and all retirement benefits. Post-hearing interviews showed Anderson's continued defiance and complete lack of understanding. "This whole thing is political correctness gone crazy. I was doing my job, protecting the community." His comments guaranteed continued federal investigation interest and eliminated any possibility of future law enforcement employment. Morgan's response remained dignified and focused. Today's decision represents the first step toward accountability. Real reform requires sustained commitment to constitutional policing, not just individual punishment. Anderson left the hearing escorted by federal marshals and immediately arrested on civil rights charges. The symbolism was powerful. From police authority to federal defendant in a single day, his destruction was complete. But Morgan's transformation of American law enforcement was just beginning. 6 months after Anderson's arrest, Morgan's incident had become the catalyst for the most comprehensive police reform in American history. Congress passed the Federal Law Enforcement Accountability Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. The legislation, nicknamed the Morgan Standards by media and law enforcement nationwide, established unprecedented federal oversight for any department receiving military cooperation funding. The Morgan Standards became federal law with immediate effect. Mandatory bias training with federal oversight every 90 days. Automatic funding. Suspension for any civil rights violations. Comprehensive annual compliance, audits, independent oversight requirements, and enhanced background checks for all officers in federally funded programs. Anderson's former department transformed completely under federal monitoring. A new chief was appointed with direct community input. For the first time in the city's history, bias training became monthly requirements rather than annual suggestions. A citizen oversight board was established with real investigative authority and subpoena power. Body camera policies were strengthened with automatic federal review of all use of force incidents. Morgan received promotion to Pentagon Policy Director for Civilian Military Law Enforcement Cooperation, overseeing the implementation of reforms she had personally designed. Her experience transformed federal approaches to police funding, training requirements, and accountability measures nationwide. Anderson was convicted on federal civil rights charges and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. State criminal prosecution resulted in additional convictions for false arrest and abuse of authority. The civil lawsuit settlement exceeded $6 million, paid entirely by city insurance, driving premium costs up across the region. National police organizations initially resisted Morgan Standards, but federal funding pressure forced rapid compliance departments faced a simple choice: enhanced accountability or reduced federal support. Most chose accountability over autonomy. Academic research institutes began studying Morgan's incident as a definitive case study in effective reform pressure. Her professional response, strategic use of military authority, and systematic approach became required. Curriculums in criminal justice programs nationwide, police training academies across all 50 states incorporated the Morgan case into mandatory coursework. Her handling of illegal detention became the textbook example of de-escalation documentation and strategic response under extreme pressure. Congressional oversight hearings examined military-civilian law enforcement partnerships with Morgan. As the primary expert witness, her recommendations became automated federal policy affecting thousands of departments and millions in funding allocations. Anderson's former city became a model for successful reform implementation. Federal oversight ended after 18 months of demonstrated compliance. Community relations improved dramatically. Citizen complaints decreased by 60%, and professional standards were elevated to levels that attracted quality recruits from across the region. Other departments facing similar federal review studied the city's reform model extensively. Morgan was personally consulted by over 40 municipalities seeking federal oversight resolution through comprehensive accountability measures, rather than lengthy legal battles. Anderson's former colleagues embraced reform rather than resist federal requirements. Professional officers recognized the benefits of enhanced training. Clear standards and community support earned through genuine accountability. International law enforcement communities studied Morgan standards as the premier model for police accountability in democratic societies. Her Pentagon role expanded to include consulting with allied nations, implementing similar reforms in their law enforcement systems. Police unions nationwide adapted to new accountability requirements. Rather than fight inevitable change, professional officers supported enhanced standards that clearly distinguish competent law enforcement from incompetent or biased policing. Morgan's military career accelerated rapidly. Pentagon leadership considered her for early promotion to general officer, based on innovative leadership in civilian-military cooperation. Policy development and systematic reform implementation that had transformed American policing. Federal funding for police training actually increased under Morgan standards as departments meeting accountability requirements received enhanced support for professional development equipment, modernization, and community policing programs, but Morgan's true legacy was just beginning 2 years after the incident that changed American law enforcement forever. Morgan drove her luxury car back to the intersection of Cedar and Oak Street, where Anderson had first pulled her over the corner, now featured a small memorial garden created by community activist Constitutional Accountability Square, honoring her contribution to nationwide police reform. Fresh flowers were placed regularly by visitors who came to see where systematic change had begun. She parked in the same spot where Anderson had forced her to endure humiliation. But everything had transformed completely. Officers in the newly reformed department receive monthly enhanced training, comprehensive community oversight, and federal accountability measures. That prevented racial profiling traffic stops now followed strict protocols that protected both citizens and professional officers. Anderson was serving his federal prison sentence in minimum security facility. 3 states away, divorced, estranged from children, who had legally changed their names to escape association with his actions. He spent his days in prison. Library reading about civil rights cases. His story had become required study material for new police recruits, learning about consequences of bias abuse of authority and constitutional violations. Morgan's Pentagon office overlooked Arlington National Cemetery, providing daily reminders of service members who had died defending the constitutional principles. Anderson had violated her work, honored their sacrifice through civilian-military law enforcement partnerships built on mutual accountability and shared commitment to justice. Federal statistics demonstrated measurable improvement wherever Morgan standards had been implemented. Civil rights complaints decreased by an average of 58%. Community trust in law enforcement increased significantly. Department liability costs dropped substantially. Officer retention improved, as professional standards attracted quality candidates while deterring those unsuited for constitutional service. Letters arrived regularly at Morgan's office from officers trained under the new standards. One from a young black officer particularly moved her. "Your example showed me what professional service looks like under extreme pressure. Thank you for transforming the profession. I wanted to join." With pride, similar correspondence came from police chiefs, community leaders, federal officials, and international law enforcement professionals. Her impact extended far beyond a single traffic stop into systematic transformation that was reshaping democratic policing worldwide. Morgan kept her late husband's military portrait prominently displayed. The veteran had faced similar discrimination, fought comparable battles, and dreamed of equality. His wife had finally achieved through professional excellence. Under unimaginable pressure, the luxury car represented her complete journey from personal injustice to systematic reform. The vehicle that had triggered Anderson's bias had become a symbol of professional success, earned respect, and constitutional service properly honored through accountability. Military. Civilian law enforcement cooperation thrived under enhanced federal oversight. Departments meeting Morgan standards received increased federal support, advanced training opportunities, equipment, upgrades, and community development funding that benefited everyone, committed to professional service. Anderson's former department was now considered the national model for successful reform implementation. Federal oversight had ended ahead of schedule. Due to demonstrated compliance, community relations were completely restored. Professional standards elevated to levels that attracted recruits from across the nation. Seeking departments committed to constitutional policing, Morgan's promotion to full colonel was confirmed with unanimous support. Military leadership recognized her extraordinary contribution to national security through civilian-military cooperation, innovative policy development, and systematic reform leadership that had strengthened democratic institutions. She maintained clear perspective about individual vindication versus systematic change. Personal justice matters less than preventing future victims through professional accountability. Constitutional service and community trust built on genuine reform. Rather than empty promises, police training academies used her case as the definitive example of proper constitutional service under pressure. How professional officers should respond to stress, maintain standards during crisis, and protect community trust through personal accountability. That honors the badge, congressional recognition, followed with Morgan receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom for civilian service. Military-civilian partnerships were permanently strengthened through her leadership vision and professional example that proved accountability protects everyone. The intersection monument included the inscription, "Morgan had suggested professional service honors, constitutional principles, accountability protects everyone." The words reflected her fundamental belief and shared commitment to justice through professional excellence. New officers trained under Morgan standards now patrolled the same streets Anderson had once controlled through bias and intimidation. Professional policing had completely replaced prejudiced enforcement through systematic accountability that served all citizens equally. Professional accountability protects constitutional service, bias destroys everything. Morgan's story proves that a single moment of courage can transform entire systems. When met with professional response, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to justice, her experience offers a powerful blueprint for anyone facing injustice. Document everything, meticulously respond with absolute professionalism. Use available authority strategically, and focus relentlessly on systematic change over personal revenge. This is not just about one racist cop getting what he deserved. This is about how one person's refusal to accept injustice quietly changed American law enforcement forever. But here is what makes this story even more incredible. Morgan could have taken the easy path. She could have accepted an apology, taken a settlement, and moved on with her life instead. She chose to fight for systematic change that would protect every person who came after her. Share your own experiences with police accountability in the comments below. Have you witnessed transformation in your community? Since the Morgan standards were implemented, what reforms do you think would make the biggest difference in your area? Your voice absolutely matters in this ongoing national conversation about professional law enforcement and constitutional service. The Morgan standards continue spreading to every corner of America as federal requirements expand monthly departments that choose enhanced accountability over federal funding loss, consistently find increased community support, professional pride, and sustainable improvements in public safety that benefit everyone. Anderson's destruction serves as a permanent warning about the devastating consequences of unchecked bias, career annihilation, personal devastation, criminal conviction, civil liability, and professional disgrace. Individual choices matter tremendously. Bias destroys lives, but accountability protects everyone involved. Future challenges remain significant, as some departments still resist comprehensive reform. Communities demand faster change, and political pressures threaten sustained progress. Morgan's leadership continues through policy development, training, oversight, and federal accountability implementation. That's reshaping law enforcement nationwide. International observers are studying American police reform as the premier model for democratic societies trying to balance public safety with constitutional rights. Morgan's military background brings unmatched credibility to civilian law enforcement accountability discussions worldwide. Next month brings explosive congressional hearings on expanding Morgan standards to all federal law enforcement partnerships, not just military cooperation programs. Her testimony will directly influence policy affecting thousands of departments and millions of officers nationwide. Young officers trained under these enhanced standards represent the future of American policing, professional service, genuine community trust, constitutional accountability, federal oversight, and systematic reform. This new generation embraces change that senior officers initially fought. But the most incredible part of this story, we are just getting started. Next week's investigation reveals how Morgan's Pentagon connections uncovered a massive nationwide network of police departments systematically violating federal training requirements while receiving hundreds of millions in military cooperation funding. Her methodical approach identified corruption patterns spanning 38 states, over 600 departments, and thousands of officers, and the federal response will completely reshape American law enforcement forever. What systemic changes would you implement to ensure constitutional policing in your community? Drop your reform ideas in the comments below and join this crucial conversation about building law enforcement that truly serves everyone with professional accountability, genuine respect, and unwavering constitutional service. The revolution in American policing started with one traffic stop. Where will it end? Subscribe now to find out. Because this story is far from over. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions do not come with noise, just one person standing their ground at beat stories. We highlight those moments that shift the balance. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, because every week we bring real stories that shake the system.